EC3 students, Principles of Management class. Welcome back. Today is Monday, 11/7 that I'm recording this video for you for the week. We are a little behind this week. I realized there were some Blackboard issues. Several of you had expressed concern about finishing up your homework and some of the items from last week that were due on Friday. Others have expressed concern that they weren't able to access Blackboard until just recently today because they were unable to get on for whatever reason. So just get last week's work to me as quickly as possible. If you are having some extenuating circumstance, please reach out to me, right? You have my phone, 814-490-6473. Shoot me a text or send me an email, crobertson@ec3pa.org. All right, so week 2, most of you seem to be doing okay with week 2. This week we are going to, if you haven't already seen the post that I put up on Friday, I believe, for week 3. I was trying to get it up there a little early, and then unfortunately a lot of you had trouble logging on, and there have been some other issues with Blackboard, so I apologize for that. The website's been down and it created a few issues, right? So hopefully you're enjoying items so far. Chapter 5 from the text, 5 and 8 are going to be this week's work. Again, I will extend the due date for a couple days on this week's work because a lot of you have not been able to get onto Blackboard, I've even had students express concern that they could not see the items under week 3. If that's happening to you, please let me know. Several students have been able to get on and see things, so I'm not sure. There could be other Blackboard issues. However, it sounds like they are doing major work out on my street, so I apologize if there's background noise happening, and I'm not exactly sure what they are working on. However, we all have those types of things, right? Okay, so we are going to do for week 3, read chapters 5 and 8 from the text. So 5 starts to get into ethics, corporate responsibility, and sustainability. And so a couple of things that we talk about in 5, right? If you are, 5 begins on page 119. And, you know, ethics is a real concern when we talk about, those of you that have had me for 101 and other business classes, you know, it's a tricky topic when we talk about capitalism and we talk about businesses, we talk about management theory, leadership. You know, there are several layers there when we talk about what's ethical, what's legal, you know, what's considered unethical. So those things I know we touched on in Business 101 for those of you that had it, but in this course we're going to talk a little bit more about how it is from a leadership standpoint and how ethics, you know, relates to business. So again, as a more dialed in class than like the 101 class, for instance, you know, we're going to touch on specifically management topics and relate things specifically to the managerial level. And so how then, you know, what are ethics in business? What are ethics and what are business ethics in 5.1? And how in 5.2, ethics at the individual level, right? So even though most of us believe there are certain things that are bad and wrong, right? Most of us believe, or hopefully all of us believe murder is wrong, right? Assault, things like that harm other individuals, you know, but there's other areas that maybe aren't quite so well defined, right? That we may have differing opinions on as to what would be considered ethical and what might not be. And if you find a $1 bill randomly on a dark back street, do you just pocket it, right? Who are you going to go after? So thinking about how you might respond to certain questions isn't good or bad. It just defines like how you feel about things from an ethical standpoint. So 5.3 starts to talk about responsible decision making. 5.4 gets into ethics at the organizational level, and you know, what are some trends within an organization and how those trends are often shaped by leadership and by management. 5.5, ethics, corporate culture, and compliance. And so talking about corporate culture is a big one in this because, you know, from a management standpoint, that's the driving force, or at least management is the layer below top leadership that really implements a lot of, you know, the style of an organization. And some of you may have worked for organizations where you did not feel comfortable. Maybe they wanted you to cut corners when you didn't think that that was the proper thing to do, right? And so oftentimes we will find ourselves having those types of issues. let's see. So 5.5 corporate culture and compliance. 5.6 corporate social responsibility. So CSR. This is a newer area we've seen emerge. Even it was emerging really, 2000 after the crash, right? So like 2008, 2009, even 2010, when our economy was recovering, or in the U.S., right, overall, after the market took some major swings, and then into the 10, 12, 20, by 2015, companies realized that they actually needed to understand, their diverse cultures better, and add to those cultures, and also get the most out of those cultures that they could. So corporate social responsibility is a newer topic, right? And some larger organizations actually have a whole department that is in charge of CSR. And they have an officer, right? You have a CEO, you have a COO, you have a CFO, and you may have someone that is in charge of corporate culture or corporate social responsibility that would be at the executive level. So that's a little bit newer, and really it was spawned from prosperity that was happening across the country in business and in industry that allowed businesses to take a little bit of a step back and say, okay, now that we have some breathing room from the volatility of the markets that were the late 2008, 9, 10 era, now that we have some footing again, let's look at how we can actually be better as we move forward. So that was where corporate social responsibility really started to take off. It's always been there, but it really started to take off really in the last 10 years. And money was able to be put into, and more businesses started to take on more responsibility themselves to be socially responsible and to be ethical and outwardly doing things to help the community that weren't just profit-driven items, right? But actually created this like social capital that, you look upon businesses favorably that do things that give back, right? And so this idea that not just driving by that directly getting profits, right? You can indirectly influence consumers and, the country and world at large about your brand or about your image through, these corporate social responsible tactics, right? So being socially responsible is important for businesses if they want to move forward successfully, right? No one wants to support a business that, or individuals don't want to support a business that doesn't think about their footprint, their carbon footprint, or doesn't think about the damage they do in the name of profits, right? We want businesses that are not only thinking about how they can move forward, but they're also thinking about how they give back. All right, 5.7, ethics around the globe, right? We all, from country to country, even state to state, sometimes things vary a little. So you can imagine around the globe when we have all these different cultures, what things are considered ethical in some cultures might not be considered ethical in others, and vice versa. And 5.8, emerging trends in ethics, corporate social responsibility, and compliance. So think identifying some, contemporary ethical and corporate social responsibility issues. So that would be 5.8. So I do have a short video for you. Once you log on, you will see that there is a PowerPoint there for you to review for Chapter 5. And there is also a short video, Corporate Social Responsibility, Microsoft Case Study. So that is there for your reviewing. Hopefully you find that and it adds to your knowledge for this chapter. Hopefully you find that interesting. Now, we skip ahead to Chapter 8. So make sure that you are doing this in your readings. We are skipping ahead to 8. So this week, it's 5 and 8 for your reading materials. Now, so Chapter 8, once you skip ahead, begins on 247. So Chapter 8 starts to talk about strategic analysis and how a firm's competitive environment really affects how the firm behaves, right? So Chapter 8 starts to talk about that, starts to talk about the SWOT analysis. And so when we're looking at Chapter 8, it really dives deep into the theory of the SWOT analysis. And so let's look at the different components of Chapter 8. Gaining advantages by understanding the competitive environment, right? Understanding, and some of you that have had me for entrepreneurship or you've had me for Business 101, we talk a little bit, or we at least touch on this idea of a SWOT analysis and understanding the outside opportunities and threats. And that really is also learning about your competitive environment. Do you have some rich competitors? Not rich financially, maybe rich financially, but what's the competition like? If you think of it like a foot race and you're running a really fast 50-yard dash, right? Are you competing against folks that are much slower than you, so you're going to win no matter what, or are you competing against a group of competitors that are much faster or at least equal to you, that it could be a tight race? You're going to really have to up your game. It's the same for businesses, right? If they are in a very competitive environment, they really need to mind their P's and Q's. They need to make sure that they're being careful with efficiency, right? They're making sure that their product is going to edge out other competitors, right? And it is through this competition, healthy competition, that we actually get better and better products, right? And we know this just from looking at the cell phone industry and how they are constantly pushing each other to have better cameras, have stronger screens, better cell reception, more apps, more user friendly, more storage space, like all those things, because they're all competing for your dollar as the consumer. And so they push each other to new levels, right? So that's what the competition really does. And so 8.1 is talking about understanding the competitive environment. 8.2 starts to talk about the SWOT analysis, right? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And really what we're thinking about when we're thinking about these items, we're thinking about internal and external influencers. And internal and external influencers, what happens with those folks is that this is what's going to drive your company, right? So from a management standpoint, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, from an employee standpoint, from a top leadership standpoint, understanding what your company's strengths are and what their weaknesses are, right? And really, some companies do this almost on a weekly basis with their management team. They say, okay, we know that these are our strengths. It is the second week of November. We're having a meeting. Okay, we've identified these items as our strengths. And how are we continuing to bolster those strengths? We've identified these items as our weaknesses. What are we doing to turn those weaknesses into something that we can move into the strength column? What have we done this week, right? Or what did we do last week? Let's take a summary. So strength and weaknesses, really identifying those and bolstering strengths and trying to turn weaknesses around. So those are the internal items. The external items, opportunities and threats. And really, in such a fast pace, some industries are very fast paced. So understanding where opportunities are almost on a weekly basis, because they might be changing that quickly, and snatching those up is so important for some businesses as they grow, right? Or their competitor is going to snatch them up, right? And then threats are the same thing. What are new threats that are emerging in our industry? And so depending on what's happening in our economy, what's happening globally, this SWOT analysis, SWOT, really is a nice quick summary of let's take a picture of our business and outline it, right? A lot of you have already worked with SWOT analysis, whether it was in the Business 101 and you did a project, whether it was in other classes you've taken. This SWOT analysis is a great way to capture what's happening with the business. So we'll start to talk about that for strategic analysis. That's 8.2. Firm's external environment, right? So thinking about that, starting to talk about Porter's 5 forces, which I'll give you a spoiler alert. I do have a short video clip there for you, Porter's 5 forces for chapter 8. So as you're going through that, I kind of hone in on that a little bit. Then starting to talk about the internal environment, right? I talked about the strengths and weaknesses. That's really the internal component. Competition strategy and the competitive advantage. That's 8.6. And then strategic positioning. So how do we take things that are happening within, internally, strengths and weaknesses, right? And then we think about what's happening and we look at what's happening from an opportunity or a threat standpoint. And then how do we use that overall in our strategic plan? Or how do we position ourselves strategically within our industry? Whether we are an entrepreneur who is just starting off with a small business, right? How do we position ourselves within the realm of our industry or our community or whatever it might be, our specific product that we're offering? Or we're a very large company like Coca-Cola, right? And we're trying to plan 1 to 5 years out, a long-term strategy plan, 20 years, right? Maybe we want a weekly strategy plan, whatever it might be. So talking about strategic planning and what things go into that planning process. All right, so that's chapter 8. As I mentioned, there is a short video, Porter's 5 forces. Hopefully you like that video. That link is there. So when you click on Blackboard, you will see PowerPoint review for chapter 5 after you've read chapter 5 in the text and highlight some items. There's a short video on corporate social responsibility relating to Microsoft, and that's chapter 5. Then there is Principles of Management, PowerPoint video, chapter 8. and then a quick chapter 8 video, Porter's 5 forces. Now there's also a discussion for this week. I know there's a lot going on in this class, right? The discussion for this week, again, 2 to 3 sentences. Well, actually this one you can do a little differently. You can either take this discussion and have a couple sentences, or you can do it in the form of bullet points or like a list, right? And what I'm looking for is for you to perform, it's going to relate to chapter 8, perform a SWOT analysis of a business, right? So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Select a business from a specific industry, such as hospitality, a hospitality business, hotel, restaurant, fitness, manufacturing company, not-for-profit, whatever you might want to pick, right? So you could pick a specific company, right? If you've already had 101, you could pick the company that you used for that class. There's a company that you've been studying, by all means, or a company that you're interested in, you know a lot about, use that company. So you're going to list the company, right? You're going to say, I'll pick on Coca-Cola. You're going to put Coca-Cola up there and as the company. And then you're going to give me the strength, right? I gave you the 4 topics. Give me a strength that they have. And you can do it, put strength, put S dash, and you can put the an example of a strength that is specific to Coca-Cola, an internal strength that is something that would be a strength of Coca-Cola is their brand. They have a very strong brand image, right? And their symbol, Coke, is synonymous with, actually, the Coke symbol is synonymous with cola often, right? So strengths, weaknesses, you can talk about things relating, pick a weakness that Coca-Cola you feel might have. You can Google it, come up with it on your own. Again, I'm looking more for you just to be thinking about a company's in a more in-depth fashion. And then you're going to give me an opportunity and a threat. You can even write SWOT, right? And then list the 4 out. Give me a strength, give me a weakness, give me an opportunity that Coca-Cola might have. Maybe they haven't expanded to certain countries of the globe. Maybe they haven't, maybe there's a packaging thing they could do that would be different. Maybe they could have Coca-Cola gum, it would take off, or Coca-Cola candy that hasn't taken off. Whatever it might be, an opportunity that might be there for them. And then threats. What might be some of the threats that would impede Coca-Cola from moving, from growing, or could actually, maybe set them back a bit. So thinking about threats, and it can be anything. COVID was a huge threat once it hit, right? A pandemic is a threat. It's a unlikely threat, but it is still a threat. Not being able to find enough labor, right, in certain parts of the country or certain parts of the world, that's a threat. It's an external thing that's happening that you need to be aware of as a company. So try this one. Again, you can have a few extra days this week because I don't want you to get behind, but because we kind of had a little bit of a goofy week with the website, having issues and whatnot. But take your time, or not necessarily take your time, but just be thinking about a company you want to use for a SWOT analysis. And you're not really going to get a wrong answer. For this one, I just want to see you critically think about a company. So that's your discussion for this week. I will touch base. It is Monday. I will touch base in the next 2 days or so. Make sure that everybody's moving on the right track. Everybody's kind of got week 2's information or assignments done and moving forward, and that you're not falling behind, right? Because remember, it's an 8-week class. We go 7 weeks really strong. We do a lot of review that 8th week, and we take we do our last little project, and we take our final. And then you're done. Management in 8 weeks. That's a short time. Typically, I teach this in a 16-week format. But so that is what's due for this week. If you have questions, reach out to me. If you have concerns, if you have technical issues, you can always text me, right? If you can't get it, your email. You can stop on campus, right, at St. Ben's there, SBEC, and talk to Mary in the library, talk to Dean of Student Services, Dr. Bowman, talk to Clarissa in Student Services, whatever it might be. I'm on and off campus often. I will be on campus Wednesday midday. If anyone wants to meet in person and have a short discussion, please let me know. I can set up a time for you, but I can also meet with you via Zoom, via Collaborate here within Blackboard, whatever it could be, live discussion if you have questions for me. Have a wonderful afternoon, and I'll talk to you soon.